So let's say we're starting to work off that pomegranate. If I want to draw it out, I can do like a rough sketch here. I'm not going to be able to see that much, but I can see just enough to where I have a good idea of where to paint. So as you're starting, now the background's dry. I'm going to make sure my brush has a little bit of water on it. Kind of test it out and see how much. We're using a student grade paint. Acrylic is thick, we're going to be able to paint over. But as I start with this red, I can start with orange layer, I can start with yellow. I'm going to start with red. You can see it's not 100% covering up all this green, especially if I were to keep going like this across from it, the red is going to get thinned out. As you build up your first layer, part of this is to also realize that you don't have to cover up everything. I painted this background green, I can use that green. If there's a part that I want a little bit of that background color to still kind of shine through, I don't have to paint this, 100% red. So maybe I'm okay with that. But because you need the brush to be a little bit wet and fluid, the reality is that you may have to come back over it a little bit. Sometimes as you're learning, you end up almost like scraping it off. One thing you can try is coming across with a light pressure and holding your brush almost like horizontal, parallel to the canvas. I can think about brush strokes if I want to, what direction they're in. I know it's kind of almost like a crown over there. So it's the beginning of my pomegranate. So now my pomegranate, it has some dark areas, it has some highlight areas. So I'm not going to leave it just, all red, but because this paint is thinner, if I come in here and start trying to add my bluish purple that I just made on top of the red, it is almost scraping that across. Different types of paint are going to react differently. I'm going to add a little bit of straight blue just to kind of show you guys. If I put this blue with the red, I gotta watch out as I blend this. So say I'm gonna blend this in to make it, kind of a purple. Get a little bit of red in there with it. See how now I'm almost scraping, if I push hard, see how I'm scraping the paint away and I end up with my green background again. You do have to be paying attention to the pressure. And this might be an area where you do have to build up, depending on the color of your background. I came in with a little bit of yellow and integrated that with the red, so I end up with a little bit of orangey. You can see I kind of started getting a little bit of that almost crown. I haven't done anything with the leaves yet, but you can see where I did that blue kind of purpley shadow. As I'm building up, I kind of like that the green is showing through in some spaces because I like that contrast of the green. But if you wanted to continue to build up a little bit more of the red of the pomegranate, you definitely could. So as I'm coming back to this, if I feel like I need a little bit more red, I can hit this, and I'm going to start thinking of the shape of it. Pomegranates are almost angular. If I feel like I need a little bit more of a hit of red, I can do that. What I'm not going to do, I'm not going to just do this. You can see that that style is not consistent with what I've had going on. If I want a little bit more red, I'm going to kind of integrate it and brush it over. But at the same time, I need to still resonate with what I was doing before. So this area right here, this is definitely a shadow. I definitely need more of that. So I need to get some blue or some dark green or make a purple. So since this red is wet, kind of what we talked through yesterday, you can see if I just drop blue in there, this blue is too bright, it's going to grab too much attention. So this is where the wet on wet blending comes in. As I work this area, there's other areas up here that I need a little bit of that purpley blue. There's areas over here. So as I kind of integrate it over here, I can still use what's on my brush. And then now I'm kind of subtly adding some of that dark, and I'm starting to shade a little bit of that. There's a little bit of a darker area here too as well. So if this purple ends up a little too blue, I can still come back with a little bit more red and balance it out to a little bit more of a purple. What happens if I add a little bit of a greenish blue? Does a greenish blue make it pop a little bit more than the purple? You might like this effect, you might not. As you're working, this is all still wet. Maybe you decide you like it, but it's a little bit too obvious and you need to tone it down a little bit. So remember, you need a little bit of water on your brush for flow, but remember this paint is a little bit thinner than a professional grade acrylic, so you can get away with a little bit less water on your brush, but if you find you need a little bit more of a fluid stage, and go. So I'm just kind of going back over it with a little bit more red. Maybe I like this color where it ended up. Maybe I like that darker color that ended up with the green. It's okay to experiment a little bit with some of these colors and values that you're creating. And I can come back if I want to add a little bit more red on top of it. I'm going to let it dry, but I can come back to it and smooth that out if I want to. On this side, I have a little bit of a smoother because I was blending that. So this is one approach. I can kind of blend that wet on wet a little bit smoother. Over here, it's still wet on wet, but I dropped down that darker color on top and I didn't really blend it. I left it with a little bit of that roughness of the canvas. So you can kind of decide which way you like a little bit better. If you like the softer blending, then make sure you're kind of going over it a little bit more. If you like the rougher part, then stick with that. So I'm gonna start adding in a little bit of like my highlight area. There's a good strong highlight coming across here. A good low strong highlight, kind of like I said, almost angular here. And then there's a little bit of lighter area on this side as well. I'm still doing what we've been doing all semester. I'm building up layers, but I'm also blending them together now. I can still build up shadows. I can still build up highlight. I don't quite have a range of values right now. It's a little bit dark. I need to brighten up and, let's say get a little bit of a lighter value up here. I can do this now with the wet on wet approach. I can do that later with the dry brush approach, but I gotta make sure that I don't just drop that yellow on top where it's not gonna, have a little bit of a cohesiveness. So you can see drop down a little bit of that yellow and that brightens that up. Can I use white? Definitely. Remember that once I use white, it's going to change the feel of that color. So if I add white to yellow, I'm going to end up with more of a pastel-y kind of color. So for me, I am going to keep just using yellow as my highlight color and work that in. Not quite done, but you can see how we're going through the process of building up those layers, and then we'll continue on.